Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Speaking as Champions podcast, where we uplift athletes and professionals at every level while helping develop character, competence, and confidence. I'm honored to be joined by Jim Ellis, an award winning entrepreneur, leader in higher education, professor, author, and someone whose career has had a tremendous impact on students, professionals, and the communities that he's served in. He served as the dean of the USC Marshall School of Business from 2007 to 2019, and throughout his career, he has demonstrated what it means to lead with purpose. And he is also the author of A Journey of Insights, which shares lessons and reflections from his life and career. Jim, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. And to start off, I'd love for you to kind of walk us through your story and tell us a little bit about your journey and what led you to where you are today.
Well, thanks, Olivia. It's nice to be with you. I appreciate the time. I started off as a student, grew up in the state of New Mexico, Albuquerque, New Mexico. Started off as undergrad at the University of New Mexico with the intent to become a professional golfer. And it was pretty obvious that wasn't going to work. So I quickly had to transition to figuring out a way that I could make a living and was a business major. I then applied to graduate school and was fortunate enough to get into Harvard Business School right out of undergrad. And spent 2 years there, had a great experience, and came to work in Los Angeles for a chain of department stores. And so I had a great experience as a buyer of menswear and housewares. I learned a lot about how the consumer works, how the consumer thinks, and had some great experiences traveling all over the world buying merchandise to put in those stores. So that was a particularly great experience. But then I moved on and went to a couple of smaller companies. Ultimately became the CEO of a company owned by the Porsche family out of Europe. So everything that they made except the car was under my guidance, and I didn't have the cars, so that I got to drive the cars, but I didn't get to sell the cars. And bought and sold some companies, so I had experience as an owner of companies as well as being a CEO of 9 different companies. And at the ripe old age of 50 years old, I changed my whole career and went to the University of Southern California to be a marketing professor. And I taught there for a number of years, had a great experience, loved being in the classroom, loved being with students, thought that was really fun. And Then they asked me if I'd be the dean of the school, and I did that for 12 years. So I had a good run in the education field and really saw, I think what's most important is how much young people are ready to take over and take the world to the next level. And I think people talk a little bit about young people are lazy or young people are entitled or whatever. I don't agree with that at all. I've seen too many young people that are working too hard to do well in whatever they choose to do. And couldn't be happier to see that.
Amazing. That sounds like a very cool journey that you had. So, from being dean of the Marshall School of Business, what would you say was like the biggest lesson that you learned from that experience?
Well, I think the biggest lesson I learned from the experience is that, it's all about people, and it's all about listening to people and what they want to do, and trying to help them get on their way. At our school, we had some 4,000 students as undergrads, and we had a couple of thousand more grad students, and everybody had a different path they wanted to go on. Some didn't know what they wanted to do. Others had been totally prepared from the day they got there. And so you find out that, it's okay if you don't know what you want to do. That's why you're in college. And by the time you graduate, if you still don't know what you want to do, then you go out and you keep trying new things until something clicks. And it may take a long time till it clicks, but it will click at some point in time. So I think my goal was to help people get on that path and get them to a point where they really found their passion at some point. I mean, I quite honestly, my passion didn't cut in until I started teaching. So that's way into the middle of my career. And so I think it's really important that we help people and we try and give them guidance, and wherever we can, we help them.
Yeah, and I think that's the case for a lot of student athletes, especially because we spend so much time like focused on our sport. So then when it's time to pivot and change into professional, it's like, okay, like what's going on now? Like what do I like as much outside of being on the track or like being on the court and stuff like that. So that's definitely a big part of it.
I think what you do as an athlete, and I played my sport for all 4 years, you learn discipline, you learn work ethic, you learn how to get up in the morning because you got to go work out. You learn, how to be really good at something and what it takes to be really good at something. So the characteristics of a good athlete transfer very easily to other careers. If I take business because that was my thing, I can see great athletes become great business people, and it just works really well. I always wanted to hire athletes because I knew they'd work harder than everybody else because they had to do it while they were in school.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I heard from Stephanie that you had an interesting final exam regarding listening. So could you share with us what that experience was like and kind of what it taught you?
Are you talking about the business degree that we put together in three different universities?
I think she was referring to
Is that what you're?
ex- the exam where you had to like listen for your final. You had to listen for like 45
Oh,
minutes.
that. Okay. Okay. I got
Yeah.
that. Um, so it was a final exam in graduate school, and the exam was you had to listen. So I had to call someone that I knew but not very well and ask them to come to campus. And they came in on a Saturday morning, and it was a guy whose sister I had been dating, so I knew him a little bit, but not really well. And the exam was such that you were only allowed to ask one question in 45 minutes. And then the rest of the time, you would repeat the phrase that he last said, or you go, oh, ah, mm, or just be quiet. And so he comes in and he said, Jim, what's this all about? I go, Bill, tell me a little bit about yourself. And that was it. That's all I could say. It's the only question I could ask him. Because
Mm.
typically what happens when you're listening to people, you ask them about a party they went to last night, and while they're talking about their party, you're thinking about your party and you want to tell them as soon as they're done talking. Well, that you can't do when you're listening. So you have to really focus on them. And quite honestly, what happened is I said, yes, tell me about you. He says, well, my name's Bill. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And my dad worked for US Steel, and you know my sister. And what else do you want to know? Oh, US Steel. Yeah, my dad was a foreman at US Steel. I really didn't want to work in that kind of business, so I had to go do something else. And that's why I moved to Boston. So that's why I'm here in Boston. And I'm really having troubles finding a job. Oh, yeah, I probably have a little trouble finding a job because I don't work very hard at trying to find a job. And I'm just hoping something comes along that I'll like. And so he goes on and on and on this way. And I only could do what I just did. Mm. The end of 45 minutes, I found out he didn't like his parents. He didn't like his sister. He had a drinking problem. He had a drug problem. I wanted to come right over the table, grab him by the neck and say, "You got to get help." But I couldn't do that. I only had to listen. And at the end, I knew a lot about him. And one of my classmates had to sit in on this because he had to grade me. And so at the end of it, I said, "Look, I'm sweating. I'm hot. I got to go get a drink of water." And as I go out to get a drink of water, he turns to my classmate and he says, "He's really a good guy, isn't he?" Now, he didn't know anything about me at all. The fact that I listened to him for 45 minutes, rant and rave about how much he hated his life, et cetera, really was a plus for him. So it was a great way to really understand active learning, and that was the exam. How do you actively listen and learn? So it's pretty cool.
Wow, that's really interesting. So now pivoting to back to college students, I feel like a lot of us hear like, oh, you should choose a career that's going to make you a lot of money, or like, don't do this because you're not going to make as much money in this career, for example. So how do you think that young people should like think about the relationship between money, passion, purpose, and career?
Very good question. And quite honestly, I think you need to follow your passion first. Money will follow. The key is, what do you really love to do? Because if you do what you love to do, it's not work. If you do what you love to
Mm,
do, you are enjoying every day, every minute of every day. At some point, the money will come, you'll be fine. And it's hard to tell that to people that don't have any money and say, I got to get a job that makes a lot of money. A lot of people that make a lot of money don't enjoy it. They're not having a good day.
mm,
They're just making money. Well, that's sometimes they have to work so hard and so many hours, they can't even spend the money that they're making. So the key is do something you're passionate about, and everything else is going to follow. It'll be fine. It will be fine.
um,
And sometimes it's hard to figure out, what do you like to do? I mean, I wanted to play golf, and I wasn't very good at it compared to the guys that were making all the money. So I bought a company in the golf business. Thought, well, that'll be great because then I'll be able to make money and play golf. Well, turned out I couldn't play golf because I had to work. So that really
mm.
didn't work very well. So it's all about finding your passion, and you have to be true to yourself. What is your passion? What do you like? What do you want to do? You know, if you want to work with kids, go work with kids. Some point in time, the money will follow.
Wow, that's really good. So, as someone who's accomplished a great deal professionally, how would you say like your definition of success has changed? Because I know as athletes, like, oh, like once you get first place a bunch of times, like it doesn't feel the same as it did the first time you got it. So, how has it changed for you?
Well, success changes a lot as you go through life. And I think as you get older, success, in my case, success is having 5 kids that are really great parents and great people themselves. So I see success in my own kids. How successful were we as parents raising our children? And how successful are they as parents as they start to raise their children? That's way different than I would have told you when I was 25 or 30. And I think that, you know, trying to get to the top of an organization and be the CEO or the president or whatever, people go, well, that's going to be success because I'll make a lot of money and I'll be in charge. But then you get there and you go, well, but I'm not really passionate about this. So success really is, what's the legacy you leave? How do you impact other people? And success is how you live your life with purpose. And how do you live your life with purpose in such a way you can help other people? And I think that's really where my definition kind of comes into play. I always thought I was put here to make other people happy. And if I made other people happy, it would make me happy. And that works. It's a good thing.
Yeah, that's great. I know I've always heard like it's not so much about like how many points you scored or like the time that you ran, like it's about like the impact that you leave on your teammates. Like that's what's more important than the marks, for example.
Yep.
And
You're right.
I have a quote here from Bill Schumart, the former CEO of Southern California Special Olympics, and he had once said
Yep.
that next to the word dean in the dictionary should be a picture of Jim Ellis, and I just thought that was a really impactful statement that he made about you. So how does that make you feel personally?
Well, first of all, I have to thank Bill for saying it. I never saw it, never knew he said that. But that means a lot because I spent 12 years as a dean trying to impact a lot of students, 24,000 students during that time, that all graduated with my name on their diplomas. And I wanted to give them the best education I possibly could from the best faculty with the best resources. So my job was to make our school the best it could be. And that's a team game. You don't do that by yourself. You do it with a lot of other people. And basically, to have kids walk across that stage and get their diploma on graduation and say, "This was a great 4 years. Thank you." And that was really that's the reward for doing all the hard work, is exactly that. And the key is Do you keep in touch with former students? Do they get a hold of you and tell you, I'm getting married, I'm having children, I got a new job, I'm moving? Yes, and that's really fun. So it was all about what could I do to help those kids and how did I help them get launched in their own careers. So I'm hoping that worked, and it's really nice that Bill said that. It's great. I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, it is
So
cool.
also being in that position, like as dean, in that position of leadership, how did you navigate making like the harder decisions, or like making the decisions that like not everybody was backing you on? Like I know like as a leader, that's something that you have to do. So how did you navigate doing that?
That's really a great question, Olivia. And you have to, when you make your decisions, they have to be because you're staying true to the institution that you're working for, that you're trying to build up. And so you look at it and say, whatever I'm doing, whatever decision I make is for the betterment of this university as a dean. That's what I would have to think. And people would say, well, I don't understand why I'm losing my job. Well, you're not the perfect person in that role. We need someone that's just got a little bit different attitude in the role or different skill set. And you have to really understand where you're going, what you're trying to do, what's your vision, and stay true to that vision. Even if you really, really like that person, you've got to say, you know what, we're going to move on, or we're going to change gears here. And it's being loyal to the institution and to your vision for the institution, which trumps everything else. It's really it's got to be your guiding light. It keeps you going. And that's hard because you're going to make decisions that people aren't going to like. And, I tell a story about a professor that walked in my office and he said, I don't like anything you're doing. I think you're terrible. You're not doing a good job. And I said, this is great. Let's go over to the provost's office and I'm going to resign and you're going to become the dean. And I started to walk out the door and I turned back to him and I said, let's think about this a little bit. You're going to have to work a lot more hours than you do now. You're not going to be able to wear that flannel shirt and those jeans. You're going to have to wear a coat and tie every single day. You're going to go to breakfast every morning. You're going to go to lunch every morning. You're going to go to dinner every night. My wife says I'm home one night or two nights a month for dinner because I was working on behalf of the school. I said, you're going to have to do all that. And by the way, your ideas that you think are good because mine are bad are good for you. I have to think about a lot of other people, not just you. But come on, let's go. I can't wait to have you take over. And he says, wait, stop, 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 stop. I don't want to do that. No, you're right. Okay, I'm sorry. And you have to be tough sometimes. And he became one of my biggest supporters later on, which was great.
Yeah. Wow, that's really cool. And I think it's obviously not to the same scale, but like team thinking of athletes like team captains, like they're the ones that the underclassmen they have to go to, and sometimes they have to relay like the harder messages from the coaches and things of that nature.
That's right.
So as as a professor, how did you identify like potential in like in your students, like because I know sometimes, or at least for me, for example, there have been classes where I might not feel like as confident in what I'm doing, but like my professors on the other end like is pouring into me. I'm like I don't feel the same way. So how did you do that with your students?
You learn quickly a few things about students. For example, a good student who's really interested in getting ahead will come in and visit you during your office hours early in the semester. They won't wait until the midterm or the final and say, what's on the exam? They're going to come in and talk to you. And your job as a professor is you have to keep office hours. So you want somebody to come in and see you. And so when they come in and tell me about you, what are your goals in life? Why are you taking my class? What do you think you're going to gain from this? And in many cases, if it came down to a situation where that particular student could get either an A minus or a B plus, if they had shown an interest early on, I'm going to give them an A minus. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt on the grade. And you could see it. You knew who they were. Some of them came in and said, from day one, I want to be an investment banker in New York. That's all I'm going to do. I know exactly what I want to do. Others would come in and say, I have no idea what I want to do. Can you help me? And then we'd have to sit down and figure it all out. What do you like to do? What do you think you'd like to do? What does your dad do? What have you learned from your uncle? What have you learned from your grandfather? And talk about, what's their frame of reference. So those students that are interested in talking to you are the ones that you're gonna support. The other ones you probably never see. They don't come to office hours. They sometimes don't show up for class. And I think it's important, if you really want to do well, get into your professor's office, every semester, and introduce yourself. Hi, my name's Jim. I'm in your class. Just wanted to tell you who I am. And let the professor take it from there. But the bottom line is, you're going to show interest. And that's where the professor will say, whatever I can do to help you, you let me know.
Yeah.
And you
And
find
what
that
would you
out.
say
And
the
you learn that.
yeah.
Good.
And what would you say the importance like of these relationships are like even after college?
Well, if you've established a good relationship during college, and the two of you have really hit it off, you know them well enough that if they call 5 years later and say, "Hey, I've got a decision to make between company A and company B. I just got a job offer from company B. I've been at company A for 5 years. Here's my job offer. What do you think?" Well, you and I talked enough during college that I know who you are. I know what you can do. And I'm probably going to say, well, let's look at these two opportunities. Which one do you like? Can you go farther in company A, or is company B going to move you up to wherever your goal is? And so I know when I talk to these students years later, I know who they are, what they can do. And then I go, let's think about this. Do you really want to work that hard? Do you really want to invest that much money? Do you really want to move to a different place? Um, you're a family guy and your whole family is in New Jersey. You sure you want to leave New Jersey and go to Chicago? You have those conversations. And I think that it really helps because we've established a role when you're an undergrad that then continues into the future. And the hardest thing to do, and everybody says, get mentors, get a mentor, get a mentor. You can't walk into somebody's office and say, will you be my mentor? That doesn't work. What you do is you build the relationship, whether it's with a coach or a professor, so that he or she knows you really, really well. And when you're in a time of trouble, they can help you get through it, even if it's 10 years after you're out of school.
Yeah, that's really good. I think we have time for maybe like two more questions. So
All
I
right.
wanted to ask, one of the core ideas behind speaking as champions is it's not just simply becoming a champion or just about winning, but it's about character, competence, and confidence. So when you think about a true champion, not just in sports, but in life, what characteristics come to mind?
Well, I think victories come, and there are small victories and there are big victories, as we know. And if you take a chance on something and you want to do something and you really take a chance on it and it works, that's just great. That's a victory. And are you going to be a champion? Are they going to look at you as a champion? Not necessarily, but that is a victory that you have. And I think that victories can be big or they can be small. And I think that's how you look at these types of things. So it's really, when you're a champion, you can be a champion of a lot of different things. And so being a champion just doesn't necessarily mean you're first place in everything you do, but it has a lot to do with just the fact you've done well in something you set out to do and you got it accomplished.
Amazing. And then for our last question, what would you say is one lesson or the biggest takeaway from this that you would want young people to take away?
Learn how to listen, learn how to evaluate yourself, and then live your life with a purpose.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Jim, so much for your time and for joining me today. I really
You're
appreciate it.
welcome.
And I'm just grateful for everyone who tunes in to the Speaking as Champions podcast as well. And we will see you next time.
All right, Olivia, thank you very